Hi everyone, this is Dr. Nitin Choda and this is a follow-up video to the 2000 a month stimulus plan, and in this video I'm going to talk about the genesis of the $2,000 per month proposed stimulus and its future. Now I went through the comments and I can tell you before I get into the comments that if you take the time to watch this video all the way through to the end, I assure you you'll be in a position to make an informed decision about your opinion about this proposed plan, whether it makes sense, how it came about, and whether you believe in it or not. And I think you need to decide. As far as I'm concerned, I'm not going to take a political stand one way or another. And the reason I say that is because when I looked at the comments from the training, the two comments that really jumped out at me, the first comment, which you can see on the screen here, talked about big corporations and how big corporations, are bad, and how this became more of a Republican thing or a Democratic thing. And I think that at this moment in time, when we're all in a moment of crisis, I don't think this is the right time to argue about politics. I think at the end of the day, we need to ask ourselves what is right versus wrong, and we're all welcome to have our political beliefs, but I'm not going to take sides I'm not going to take one side or another. So that really jumped out at me, and I'm going to talk about the wealth inequality in this training, and that's basically the genesis of the $2,000 a month proposed stimulus plan, and we'll get to that in a couple of minutes. The second comment that really jumped out at me was, quite frankly, everyone out there is hurting. I know everyone out there is hurting because I read every single comment and I responded to as many as I could. People out there are in pain. People out there, some of us are struggling to buy food to eat. Some of us are taking care of dependents, children, seniors. A lot of the comments in the previous video talked about being on Social Security and potentially getting some more assistance. So I want you to know that you're not alone and we're all in this together. And in this training, I'm going to talk about the genesis of the $2,000 a month plan. And again, if you take the time to watch through the end of this video, you'll be in a better position to make an informed decision. So now Oxfam is a charitable organization that was formed in 1942 in the United Kingdom. And in 2011, they started analyzing and taking a closer look at wealth inequality in America. So what they found in 2017, in the first quarter of 2017, was that the combined assets of all US households, the combined net worth actually, which is assets minus liabilities, the combined net worth of all US households in the first quarter of 2017 was $94.7 trillion, which is all US households. Now keep in mind there are 330 million people in the United States, so that's 124 million households. So when you take $94.7 trillion and divide that by 124 million people, if the division of wealth was equal, would have $760,000. Now, you know and I know that each US family does not have $760,000. In fact, the bottom 50% of all Americans, they have a net worth of $11,000 according to this Oxfam study. Now, I want you to think about this. If you take a $100 bill and you take a stack of $100 bills, $100 bills, that's going to be a stack of bills about half an inch thick. You could fit that into your pocket. I could fit that into my pocket. Now, think about this. You spend all your life, you go to college and you build a career and you buy a house and you raise a family, and at the end of life, for half of all Americans, all the money that you made could fit into your pocket. And I know there's a huge debate about what's fair and what's not fair, but let's talk about facts here. $11,000, the average net worth of half the families in the country. There are some rich people who spend that much money on one dinner. There are people who have $700, $800, $900 bottles of wine. In fact, if you look at wealth disparity, the wealth disparity between the top 10% and the bottom 90% is 1,000%. The wealth disparity between the top 1% and the top 10% is another 1,000%. In simple words, the top 10% are much richer than the bottom 90%, and the top 1% are significantly richer even than the top 10%. The best analogy I can give you, I live in New Jersey. I would say that someone in the bottom 50% would take the bus into New Jersey, spend maybe $10-15 to get into New York City, by bus. The richer person would drive their Tesla, maybe their Maserati into New York City, and then the top 1% would just take a helicopter into New York City and land on their private helipad into New York City. So that gives you an idea of the disparity, the income disparity between the rich and the poor. In fact, Oxfam actually, when they did the the analysis in 2020, they found that from 2017 to 2020, the number of billionaires increased significantly. In fact, in the last decade, the number of billionaires, that's billionaires with a B, in the world doubled. And according to the Oxfam study, the most recent study, a big part of this was because of the tax cuts in 2017, because of the huge increase in the stock market, which obviously has seen a correction since in the last couple of months. But what they also noticed was that in the last 7 years, from 2011 to about 2018, the average salary went up about 3%, but the average stock dividend went up about 31%. And if you consider the fact that the top 1%, the richest families in the United States, own half of all stocks, you'll realize that the benefits went disproportionately to the top 1%. In fact, richer families who are in the top 10%, they have an average of $365,000 in stocks, whereas families who are in the bottom 50% have less than $5,000 in total stock holdings. So essentially, there is wealth concentration at the top, and there is wealth inequality, whether you agree with it or not. It's there. It just exists. And if you thought that was unfair, here's another statistic. The top 1% of Americans own more wealth than the bottom 90% of all Americans. In fact, back in 2017, they found that the 8 richest people in the world, and a majority of them were Americans, Jeff Bezos, Warren Buffett, Mark Zuckerberg, Bill Gates, they found that out of the 8, if you took all the wealth of the 8 richest people in the world, they had more wealth than half the human race. You heard that right. They had more wealth than half the human race. In fact, if you took the wealth of all the billionaires in the world today, the wealth of all the billionaires in the world combined, and this is more recent in January 2020, their wealth combined would be about the wealth that 4.8 billion people have, and the world's population as of right now is 7.8 billion people. So the point is, wealth is concentrated at the top. The disparity between the rich and the poor is getting much, much wider. Now, what does this have to do with the $2,000 a month stimulus plan? The $2,000 a month stimulus plan is a version of universal basic income. The fundamental belief behind universal basic income is that in order to lift the poor out of poverty, in order to make it a level playing field, everyone should receive a fixed income that's non-taxable, regardless of whatever other income they're earning, which would be taxable. And they would receive this income regardless of Social Security, regardless of other federal or state programs. Now, before I go further and before I sort of dig deeper into this, I want to take a step back and tell you that our beliefs, in fact, how you react to what I'm about to tell you, is going to be based on your emotional construct, your financial construct, your social, your spiritual, your intellectual construct. I've talked about balance in other videos on my channel. I believe in what I call as emotional balance, physical, social, spiritual, and intellectual balance. The world that we live in, the fact that a lot of people are out of work, a lot of people are losing their jobs, have lost their jobs, a lot of people don't have money to buy food, a lot of people are desperate. This is challenging the fabric of our society. This is challenging our emotional construct, because emotionally you think you have to go out, you have to work 9 to 5, you come back home, you earn a paycheck, and you get a chance to relax. That whole emotional construct has been shattered. Our social construct, our ability to interact with other people, has been altered because of social distancing. Our intellectual construct, a part of you thinks this doesn't make sense. The $2,000 a month doesn't make sense. What are we, in some sort of weird financial science fiction utopia? I get that. In fact, Governor Andrew Cuomo from New York basically said that people are frustrated, anxious, scared, and angry. In fact, he said something that was quite interesting. He said that people are just out of their element, and this is what he said.
It's mentally very difficult, it's emotionally difficult, economically it's disastrous.
So universal basic income is basically a construct that is, it's actually never been tried. In Finland, they did a study with less than 2,000 people, where these people got about 600 euros. And what they found at the end of the study, which was largely inconclusive, is that people were happier. And some people who were in the study started their own business. So this experiment, the universal basic income hypothesis, this belief has never been tested in an entire country, has never been tested with 300 plus million people in an entire country. It has its pros and cons. Obviously, we all have our beliefs about this. A lot of us believe that it would make things more fair, and I'll share what I believe in a couple of minutes. But a lot of us believe that it makes no sense at all. A lot of us believe that this will cause people to stay at home. I read some comments from the previous video saying that if kids that are 16-year-old kids start getting $2,000 a month, they'll buy pot and they'll just play video games. And with the limited studies that have been done on universal basic income, I can tell you this: it's going to help people. I can tell you that those who are stuck in poverty get stuck in a vicious cycle of poverty that is almost impossible to break out of. And the only way to break out of this cycle of poverty is that they get some sort of assistance. Now, do I believe people need to work hard? Absolutely. But we are not in a level playing field right now. Fundamentally, the rich are getting richer. And by the way, even if this universal basic income or a version of the $2,000 a month stimulus plan, even if in some world it becomes a reality, there will always be a gap between the rich and the poor. There will always be a gap. What is going to happen? I'll do a separate video training on the pros and cons of universal basic income. But what is likely to happen is that an individual who's stuck in a vicious cycle of poverty, who doesn't have many opportunities, who essentially is stuck in a dead-end job or a job that they don't like, or someone who essentially is living paycheck to paycheck, if that person can have all their stress relieved, in other words, if they can have a guaranteed basic income, what you'll see is people will be more creative, people will be more productive. Will there be some people who, just drink more booze and, stay at home watching TV and become less productive? Absolutely, that is going to happen. But our focus should be on how to make society better. Remember, society is never going to be perfect. And again, this has nothing to do with politics. This is a simple socio-economic reality. This is an economic reality that if an individual is able to get past their limitations, if an individual is able to do the job that they want, that gives them satisfaction, if an individual is able to start a business, if an individual is able to think creatively, if an individual is able to create jobs, then the 16-year-old, and again, this goes back to the comments in our previous training, the 16-year-old who now gets the money will now be motivated not to drink pot and to watch just play video games all day. By the way, the 16-year-old could make money playing video games or could start a video game. But the point I'm trying to get at is an individual could now go back to school, could start a business, could take a job that they like, could get creative, could maybe even start a non-profit endeavor to help other individuals, could do things that come naturally to them. This 16-year-old could learn how to code and invent the next Google or Facebook or the next Amazon. So we have to look at this on a very broad scale. And again, I think our beliefs towards this subject are largely influenced by our own emotional construct, by our own social construct. So when you comment down below, and I'm asking you to comment down below, in fact, I would appreciate it if you learned something from this training, please click like. Please click subscribe so that I can give you more updates, especially as this situation evolves and as things start changing rapidly in DC, which they change all the time. So please click like and subscribe. That really helps the YouTube algorithm. And definitely comment below. Now, before you comment below, I want you to know that we should not make this political. If you make it political, then I'm not going to comment on whatever if you decide to make it political. But let's make it socio-economic. Let's talk objectively on what can help and what's not likely to help. Let's talk about the pros and cons of something like this, because at the end of the day, the way we can improve is if we all have a level playing field and if we all help each other. Because fundamentally, if we are less worried about income, if we are less worried about living paycheck to paycheck, then it's likely to bring out the best in us. And this, by the way, was fundamentally what Andrew Yang talked about.
It's going to be the first thing I do as president.
This fundamentally, even Elon Musk has talked about universal basic income.
We will have to have some kind of universal basic.
It's too early to talk about whether this $2,000 a month proposed bill will ever become reality. But the fact that it's out there and the fact that we are talking about it is quite significant. So leave your comments below. I will do another training on the pros and cons of universal basic income and whether this $2,000 a month proposed stimulus makes sense or not. But I want you to remember again that when you comment below, and I'm encouraging you to comment below, I would love to get into a debate, a healthy, respectful and productive debate. I'm absolutely open to that. I'm open to agreements, disagreements. That's absolutely fine. That's what my channel is all about. That's what this thread is all about. But remember, at the end of the day, your emotional construct, your social construct and your intellectual construct, in other words, your foundations are going to influence how you react to this. Emotionally, if you have positive attitudes about money, you're more likely to say, well, yes, this $2,000 is going to help me, is going to help a lot of people. Emotionally, if you have negative attitudes towards those who are extremely poor or extremely rich, you're more likely to resist something like this, and that's fine. I'm happy to have a discussion, but again, when you comment and when you read the comments, give each and every person the benefit of the doubt, because what they are saying is an outcome of their emotional, their social, and their intellectual constructs. Socially, if you're surrounded by those who have no money, if you're surrounded by those who live paycheck to paycheck and who are stuck in the vicious cycle of poverty and can never get out, then you're going to have a different reaction to this. You're going to think that all corporations are bad. You're going to think that the Republicans are bad or the Democrats are bad or whatever. The idea is not to look at the negative, but the idea is to look at one situation and try and use it for the common good. And I know not everyone will agree. That's fine. If everyone agrees, then I think that I'm not doing a good job presenting the situation. There are bound to be people who disagree, and if you disagree, I actually think that's a good thing, because that's how debates are built. And the intellectual construct, I think that if you take the time to read the $2,000 per month proposed stimulus bill, and I'll link to that bill before, if you take the time to read it, you will understand how significant it is. And again, intellectually, it's going to challenge your construct. It's going to challenge your fundamental fabric, your fundamental beliefs about how things should be. It's going to make you wonder, this makes no sense at all. This is not the world we live in. This is not the world we were raised in. But guess what? The world that we live in today is not something that any of us expected just recently. So with all that being said, please submit your comments. Please like and please subscribe so that you can get future updates from me. I really appreciate all of you being here. I appreciate every single comment, and I will do my best to respond to the comments and to present my point of view. Okay, thank you so much. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.